Syria across enemy lines, but for now, the Channel 4 News with Jon Snow at St Paul's and Matt Fry in Boston.
The funeral of Margaret Thatcher, a gun carriage at the door. Cathedral pomp, tears from the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Hooray for Maggie Thatcher!
The left think that they can pull off a rally. Look at this. This is the right when they get together. Okay, this is the decent-minded people of this country.
She ruined this country. She destroyed a great deal that was good in it and has left nothing in its place.
Good evening. She was remembered beneath the dome of St Paul's behind me, with all the pageantry that can be mustered for a funeral of any statesman. But for all the world, Mrs Thatcher was not just any statesman. Lionised abroad, loved and hated at home, 2 heads of state attended, several former premiers and ideological brothers, Dick Cheney, H. Ross Perot and Henry Kissinger. The atmosphere along the route, friendly, mellow even, and quiet. Protest there was, but subdued. Tonight, we're here and across the country, in South Yorkshire and in Scotland, to see the way they said goodbye to Maggie.
America on high alert. Here in Boston, the FBI say they have identified a suspect in Monday's marathon bombing and now made an arrest. Meanwhile, in Washington, 2 letters have been intercepted, both possibly containing highly toxic ricin, one addressed to President Obama, the other addressed to a US senator.
In other news tonight, harpooning, the technology of centuries past, but it could be used for rockets to stop satellites crashing to Earth. And I talked to Facebook's boss, Sheryl Sandberg, to ask her if she's right. Is the reason there aren't enough female bosses because women are just too shy to lean in?
We do not give women the same opportunity and encouragement we give men. And I think it's time to change that. Men and women working together.
It was a state funeral in all but name. All the trappings, the ceremony, the symbolism. There were tears from the Chancellor, George Osborne. An echo of the Iron Lady's steely resolve in her granddaughter Amanda. Ranks of military with their polished brass. Inside St Paul's, the Bishop of London talked of a moment of calm for Baroness Thatcher after such a turbulent life. Lying here, she is one of us, subject to the common destiny of all human beings, he declared. Our first report tonight from our political editor, Gary Gibbon.
23 years after she left Downing Street, Margaret Thatcher passed one last time. The crowds 3 deep near Parliament, now 5 deep and breaking into applause. At St Paul's Cathedral, world leaders past and present were arriving to take their seats. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former US Vice President Dick Cheney. At the RAF Church, St Clement Danes, the coffin was placed on a gun carriage, the stuff of royal funerals given to few commoners. The crowds were now sometimes 10 deep, some wiping away the tears. At the cathedral, those invited included Joan Collins, Jeremy Clarkson, Geoffrey Archer and Geoffrey Howe, whose resignation triggered Margaret Thatcher's political downfall. Within sight of St Paul's, police crossed ahead of the cortege in case one demonstration got out of hand. At the Tower of London, cannons fired 1 a minute throughout the procession. In an echo of the state funeral the Queen granted Winston Churchill in 1965, Margaret Thatcher's coffin was carried up the steps to St Paul's. At the front and the back, 2 Falklands veterans, brothers, supervised the carrying of the coffin. The Queen and Prince Philip sat across from the Thatcher family. The first reading was given by Margaret Thatcher's 19-year-old granddaughter, who was born in America and is now a student there.
Stand, therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness.
David Cameron, who spent his early years as Tory leader trying to distance himself from Margaret Thatcher, gave the second lesson.
Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me.
In his sermon, the Bishop of London said there would be no eulogies for Margaret Thatcher at the service, at her request.
After the storm of a life lived in the heat of political controversy, there is a great calm. The storm of conflicting opinions centres on the Mrs. Thatcher, who became a symbolic figure, even an ism. But today, the remains of the real Margaret Hilda Thatcher are here at her funeral service. Lying here, she is one of us, subject to the common destiny of all human beings.
Now, one of us. The term she used in her political heyday to measure loyalty. The Chancellor, George Osborne, was visibly moved. The Bishop of London did say Margaret Thatcher's critics had misquoted one of her most famous lines.
Her later remark about there being no such thing as society has been misunderstood and refers, in her mind, to some impersonal entity to which we are tempted to surrender our independence.
Margaret Thatcher's favourite hymns peppered the service. Details of this morning planned with the palace and Downing Street in the years after she lost power. As the coffin left the cathedral, some of her supporters outside cheered. Her remains were taken away for cremation at a private family service. Margaret Thatcher had wanted scriptures, not tributes today, but she'd also agreed to the rare ceremonial and military presence. 48 years since she last attended the funeral of one of her prime ministers, the Queen stood again on the same steps where she said goodbye to Winston Churchill. The Queen talked briefly to the Thatcher family on the cathedral steps. It may be no politician ever has a send-off like this again.
Gary Gibbon with the picture inside the cathedral. But what was going on outside? Our chief correspondent Alex Thompson was on the streets of London from dawn this morning.
The Thatcher coffin passes the Thatcher gates in Downing Street. Trafalgar Square, and a single protester gives it all two fingers. Everyone else ignores him. So far, so British. East along the Strand to the High Court. Here a tiny number of protesters turned their backs as the coffin passed. To Ludgate Circus, former servicemen one side of the road, protesters the other, chanting "waste of money." In modern open Britain, the cost of this all but state funeral to you the taxpayer is, as yet, a secret of the state.
I'm very angry that we're using taxpayers' money to venerate a politician who is deeply controversial, deeply divisive. Margaret Thatcher was no Winston Churchill. Where Winston Churchill brought unity to this country when we needed it, Margaret Thatcher brought deep division to this country. She made the rich richer and she made the poor poorer.
You can see the pictures. The story is how few came to protest, not how many. The lady was not for turning. The protesters were not for turning up. So why had these few bothered?
Our libraries are closing again, which is what happened under Maggie Thatcher as well.
I don't want history
to be written by Cameron and the Conservative Party, I want to say actually there's a different story. There's a story where, you know, she divided this country.
When I say Thatcherism, what comes into your mind?
A massive attack on any sense of collectivity, community and solidarity in society.
But as the coffin passed here, jeering, all but drowned out by cheering. It was never going to be the quiet, dignified protest that some demonstrators would have wanted, but then again, with one of the most divisive prime ministers in British history, that was never going to happen. 4,000 police deployed, no arrests, despite one man openly using both irony and sarcasm at a major public event within yards of a cathedral.
There is a big sign over there that says clap. They put it down now, so please stop clapping. Thank you. I've got a question here from the man in black. Who am I to order you about?
As ever, banners and artwork ranging from the near incomprehensible to the brutally direct. But either side of the barriers, this occasion, in devotion or dissent, was British to the core. A curious irony for the funeral of one so divisive.